Okay, so Derek Boozy Ennis, the father slash trainer of Jerome Boots Ennis, has revealed that Ennis's team have sent a petition to the IBF saying that, almost requesting that now that the Spence and Crawford fight isn't happening, that they are almost requesting the IBF to order Spence against Boots for the belts. And yeah, obviously this comes off the back of that Spence and Crawford isn't happening next, with Crawford fighting Avanesian, which again is frustrating. This is what we have in boxing, but a lot of people are saying this is why boxing's dead. Ultimately, it's nothing new, so I don't really get too crazy about it. And I do wonder though. I will putting this out there: is it time to panic if you are a fan or you really wanted this fight to happen? Because I said before, with Spence and Crawford, those two really, really, I think should get this fight on very, very quick. To me, I often said, and I've said this before, Boots, I think, has the ability and the skill and the mindset and everything to beat both of these with Spence and Crawford. The only thing that stops him is politics or anything like that. If he can get, if he gets screwed over out of a title shot. Because to me, with Boots, now I know people are going to say he hasn't fought nobody, but ultimately he's a mandatory in the IBF. He is deserving on a shot, much like how Spence many years ago was the mandatory for the IBF when he wanted to fight Kell Brook. Boots is he's almost like the boogeyman of this division. Nobody even wants to call his name. Not Spence, not Crawford, not nobody. Now, I'm not saying these guys are afraid. I'm 100% sure they're not. I think Spence and Crawford would fight anybody, but there is nothing to gain at the moment for fighting Boots. Hence the reason why nobody calls him out. Nobody even says his name, If you look at him, there is not much things that Boots bring to the table. He isn't really a big name. He obviously, if boxing fans know him, but worldwide, he isn't known yet. Hasn't had that big fight that can make him a star, that will break him out. So, reward-wise, there's nothing much. And then risk-wise, there is a hell of a lot of risks. A guy who is a big welterweight, who can fight out of any stance. He is equally as good in both, in my opinion. A guy who is fast, athletic, carries knockout power, good footwork. I've often said he's almost like the complete fighter Boots. I've never seen somebody who has everything there is that you could want from a fighter. And I do think that, again, makes sense why I don't think they want him, but I do wonder, and this is the question I want to ask, is it time to panic? Because I've said this before, I think Boots is just a level above a lot of the guys in there. And if we're getting to a point now where you're seeing Team Ennis request that the IBF order Spence against Boots, and if you consider now Crawford fighting Avanesian, sometimes the problem with these fights stalling and taking so long is that there's always somebody who comes along and almost ruins the plans. Andy Ruiz did that with the Anthony Joshua Deontay Wilder fight, where everybody wanted it. They took too long. Fury fought Wilder. Joshua, I think after that, fought Povetkin, and then he fought Ruiz and lost. And it almost killed that fight completely. Obviously, people want to stay it, but it's not the same as it was before. It almost felt like in the Pacquiao fight when he got KO by Marquez, that almost did the same thing when he wanted to fight Floyd. You look at maybe some other examples. Recently, you look at Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney. That fight was supposed to happen, but Kambosos beat him, and now obviously we got the two Kambosos and Haney fights, which went exactly in one direction. Whereas I think it would have been better if you had Teofimo, who has that knockout power, and in my opinion, just the most skilled fighter out of the two. But yeah, I do wonder, is it time to worry about this fight never happening now? Because like I said, with Boots in the picture now, and if the IBF do order this, I do think that we are never ever gonna, well, alright, we might get the fight, but it won't be what it is, because I do think that Boots is just horrible for anybody in that division. And I mean anybody. I don't think there's one fighter who, in my opinion, at the moment beats him. Stylistically, there's nobody out there now. Obviously, mentally, there are obviously a lot of boxes he needs to check. He needs to check if he's can live up to the big fight, how he does against guys who push back against him. There's a lot that needs to be tested still with Boots, but I just think that this fight and this news does make me wonder if we're starting to see the boat kind of pass by with Crawford and Spence. And who knows, maybe, Spence talks about moving up in weight. Crawford find Avenisin. There's feels like just we're starting to lose it a bit. And with Boots, ultimately, the IBF, I know WBC kept Dylan White waiting for like all those days, but I don't know how long they can keep Boots off, to be honest, and how long it will take, because you look at it, he hasn't been IBF for like years and years and years, but he's been in it for a considerable while now, and I think we're starting to get to a point with Boots where we need to see him in with some better fighters. But it isn't really his fault. I saw somebody the other day talk about how Boots maybe is a bit overrated, because you look at like Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, young fighters who are pound for pound kings. Boots isn't there, but to me this isn't his fault. He's in a division where there are two top dogs, and those guys rule this division and essentially have been pinned for a long time to fight each other. And it isn't Boots' fault that that's not happening. Ultimately, I feel like he would fight anybody now. It isn't because he isn't good enough, or that maybe his team are doing a bad job. I just think it's that ultimately he's pinned in a division where you got a lot of big names. You look at the likes of lightweight, Haney's got young fighters in there like Tank, like Ryan Garcia, Kambosos. Actually, I don't know how old Kambosos is. I'm pretty sure he's a bit older, but you also got Teofimo. It was a younger division. Welterweight is a division where you've got two guys who are two of the very best fighters in the world, and to break into that is hard, because you then need to really stand out. And Boots has done that, but he hasn't stood out. I think it gets people where fans almost look at and think, these are the guys that you need to test himself. If you can't get the fight, obviously you'll see Boots against the likes of Keith Thurman and guys like that, but it's just not going to happen. These guys won't ever fight Boots, and I think reason being, like I said before, not because they're afraid, because as I said before, I don't think anybody's afraid in the sport of boxing. I think the reason that people don't fight Boots is because there's nothing to really gain out of all this, to be honest with you. I don't really see what is there to gain from beating Boots? Boots beats everybody, like I said, but that's just my opinion. But if you look at it, you don't really see people calling him out. Even forget what happened with Conor Benn, but Conor Benn was never calling to fight Boots, really. He was never outwardly saying his name. He might say, yeah, I want to fight him, but there's one thing about saying it and doing it, and it's because when you have guys who are on the up, same thing happened to Spence. Nobody was calling Errol Spence out when he was on the up. Everybody was avoiding that guy. Nobody wanted it, because the way Spence fights, he doesn't just. There's a thing when fighters there's beating fighters, and then there's, beating fighters. Having a win is one thing, but the way Spence used to just run through opponents was one reason why I remember looking at the Kell Brook fight and having a real bad feeling about it initially for Kell Brook before it got announced. And obviously, you saw in the fight what happened, and I think Ennis has got that same sort of feel about him, where I don't know if you can keep him off for that long before he just breaks into it. But though, I just wondered, just my thoughts though on this news that the IBF, possibly there's a chance they may be making Spence versus Boots. Maybe Spence doesn't take it, he goes up to 154, but I don't know. Spence strikes me as the type of guy who would take this fight, and who knows, maybe he does beat Boots. Again, I think personally Spence has got a better chance than Crawford, simply being he's a younger man and he has the ability to put your lights on. Now, Crawford does have that, but he's more accurate than power, Crawford. And with Boots, you've got a guy who's much younger than Crawford and who's a bit more spry, if you know what I mean. So, and Crawford's getting on a bit now. Not old man, but he's 35, 36. I think he's getting into that point where you need to make that fight pretty soon, because the more and more you wait, and if he then does fight a Boots, I think it'll get bad. It's the same for Spence if he waits too long, but Spence is still, I think, at a point where, he's still in his athletic prime, and I think he can afford now to fight Boots, and I could see him winning that fight. But I think it's a hard fight for anybody, to be honest with you. But we'll see what happens in this crazy welterweight division. Again, two great fighters, but you just need to see them fight each other. And unfortunately, we haven't got that. And like I said, Like, is it time to start worrying for Spence and for Crawford? It is, to me. I think we may be getting to that point, but just my thoughts, and yeah, let me know what you think. I don't know if personally if they will order this, because again, I don't know. It feels like, with a lot of, sometimes with mandatories, governing bodies kind of almost just overlook them entirely. But the fact that they've wrote to him and requested them to make the fight between Spence and Boots tells me that I think we're getting to a point now where you may start to see the landscape of welterweight change a bit. And to be honest, considering what's happened with Spence and Crawford these last few years, I think it might be for the better. But yeah, just my thoughts on this whole scenario. Boots, Spence and Crawford. It's a funny division that this welterweight division, as like I said, has turned into. And yeah, until next time.